Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Well, hello, everyone. Dr. Anna Cabeca here on our Couch Talk podcast. I am here interviewing Dr. Pedram Shojai on right now. He's always up to something cutting edge, new, innovative, creative. He is seriously, like we talk about the art and science of medicine, Pedram. I mean, I think of you because you have this incredible capability to combine both the art and science of medicine. And so I'm really thrilled to introduce you to my audience, especially now with your new series that you're introducing to everyone. And welcome.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you, my friend.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I'm honored to get such nice, kind words coming my way. It is an art and a science, right? Because if you wait for the science, you got to wait 15, 20 years until everyone just kind of says, okay, finally, we agree. Whereas, if you want to get better, you can't wait another day. So, that's where the art comes in is, what do we know that can help us now, and how much evidence can support that? And how do we stay right between those so that, there's real life and then there's clinical studies. And, when they collide, it just takes a while.
It does, Pedram. And then you've been on this journey. I always think of it like the evolution that I've had in my own journey. It's like I start after medical school up here, right? Okay, here's how it's presenting and here's how we're going to do what we're going to do to treat it. And then we just kept going. Well, what caused that? Well, why? And, we've like peeled back layers. So talk about your journey because it's so unique. It's really fascinating. So share that with us, your journey, where you started and how you've evolved into this master.
I don't know what I've evolved into, but if you ask my wife, I've devolved, but
we won't ask her.
Yeah, exactly. I started I was pre-med at UCLA, and I was just miserable with the results we were seeing at the hospital, just people being put on morphine. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. And then I met a Kung Fu master, became a senior student, became a monk, and traveled the world studying Taoism and Buddhism, student of the Dalai Lama, student of a lot of, I got very lucky, right? Then became a doctor of Oriental medicine because that system is, really well entwined and they work well together. Came back, started practice, was like, wow, this is crazy. The guys I went to school with are now, in a different camp and no one's talking to each other. Started a medical group, brought it all together, was doing integrative medicine for, a few years in Los Angeles. And something was wrong because I was still within the belly of the beast. And, the way the sick care model is set up, you only really get paid to fix things that are broken. There's no money in intervention, prevention, prediction, and all that. And so I'm sitting here running a practice saying, well, the only way I can make this practice thrive and, feed these employees who, are nice people who have families and, everyone's got a livelihood is to, get an MRI machine or do more procedures and just get into this like slippery slope of more expensive medicine to just generate money because that's the game. And I was like, yeah. And this is, I was a little ahead of my time because, all this functional medicine stuff started to really kind of come out later, right? And so I said, that's it. I'm gonna educate people on how not to need me, right? And got into books and films and all the stuff that we do now. And I've just been kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of really what's revolutionary and what people need to hear. Because here's the thing, Anna, is it takes an average of 17 years for the latest in medical research to get down to, your mom and pop doctor's office. So that means if you have a 15-year-old daughter who's suffering from something, by the time their doctor is even, willing to help them with it, they're 32 years old. That's a grown woman who's dealing with infertility at this point, who's dealing with, all of those, formative years, having not felt well or having acne or whatever. We can't wait that long to get this science in front of people faster. And then it just becomes a question of how do you do it tastefully and ethically so that you give them things that won't harm them, that can absolutely help them. And that's been the kind of the cutting / bleeding edge that I've been on for the last few years, right?
Yeah. And, you say I've heard 20 years, let alone 17 years. I remember coming out of Emory University and one of my colleagues saying, look, if we do what we're doing today for the next 20 years, we're doing the standard of care. And I was like, whoa, there's something wrong about that. I'm like, if I'm doing tomorrow the same thing I did today, it's because I was too stupid or lazy overnight to learn a better way. Yep. That was like my motto, my thinking. And I think that's that's part of this discovery, but also, it's the personal journey. And sometimes we're forced into looking outside of our standard care model because, it's failed us, it's come to that. And you've brought up you've done these other docuseries and movies. Talk about those, talk about each one of those. And then everyone needs to watch your latest one, which is called Interconnected, The Power to Heal from Within, right? It is just, I love the title because, I'm all about connection, Pedram.
I know. It's okay. So I'll get into the journey. How I kind of fell into this is I actually I found that I was repeating myself an incredible amount of times in clinical practice, right? It's like, okay, I don't care what diagnosis you walk in with, whether it's, PCOS or migraines or whatever. I'm asking you, what's your diet like? What's your sleep like? Are you moving around? Are you exercising? How are you handling stress? And you'd get into all these commonalities and you'd realize that regardless of the diagnosis, a lot of the algorithms went back to lifestyle. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, how do we fix this thing called lifestyle? And so as I started doing this and finding the commonalities, I started just messing around with video, like webcam videos, like, okay, folks, here's the deal. I'm tired of repeating myself, today, get up every 15 minutes or whatever it is I was doing, and started doing some instructional videos because I hail from some of these lineages where I do Qigong and yoga and all that. And they did well. And this company's like, hey man, you want to do more? So we made this film, and we started making this film called Vitality, and then we got to a point where we agreed to disagree because they wanted to go to conspiracy theories and what the government doesn't want you to know and machines that can cure AIDS. And I'm like, okay, you know what? That stuff may or may not exist, but I'm at the point where I'm still trying to get people to eat vegetables, right? Like, I don't think you understand the healthcare crisis. It's a lifestyle crisis. It's a mindset crisis. Let's start with that. And so that film did really well. Like I did the film, and as I was putting it out there, all these distributors were like, okay, here's our deal. Here's a 50-page contract where you take this, life's work of yours and sign it over to us, and maybe we'll call you back. And I'm like, wow, this isn't cool. This actually doesn't sound right at all. This is parasitic, right? And because I didn't come from the industry, I just said no. So I screened it for free online. And, hundreds of thousands of people showed up to watch it. And, 10,000 people or whatever, were like, hey, yeah, this is great. Can you help me? And we had a lifestyle program on the back of it that has helped, so many people now. And, I just short-circuited the distribution chain and went straight to the people and was able to help so many more people by doing so. And then, later, went to Netflix and Hulu and all those other places. But that became the beginning of my film journey. Followed that with a film called Origins of, kind of scratching our heads saying, okay, why is everyone sick? What are these environmental toxins? What's all this crap in the water, in the air, and the food that's different than how our ancestors grew up? And that film also, did very well and was out there. And then my last film actually departed from the health space and went towards saying, okay, well, if we're all moaning about the world being messed up, who's buying this stuff, right? Because you vote with your dollars. And so I followed the conscious capitalism movement to see what the world would look like if we were just better about who we gave our money to. And now, it's last year I came back to health. And so it just, about to launch this 9-part documentary series on the healing power of the microbiome, because every time I got all these alerts set up in my computer. I'm just geeking out about this research about the microbiome for the last 3-4 years. And finally, I'm like, man, how do people not know about this? How do people not know that we have literally changed everything? The lens we've been looking through has been wrong. This missing organ, if you will, has been right under our noses, and it interconnects with every other organ. And it basically has a very strong degree of correlation, and it touches pretty much every chronic disease we know about. And, there's a few smart doctors talking about it, and everyone else is scratching their heads, popping their pills and wondering why they don't feel well. There's a huge delta. There's a gap between what we know in the science now and what people are being told. And that's why I do what I do.
I love it, Pedram. I love everything you said in the evolution from Vitality to Origins to the conscious capitalism movement. What was the name of that one?
Prosperity. And it was
Prosperity.
About redefining prosperity to include the earth, our kids, trees, time with our dogs. This Wall Street definition of prosperity is like a tumor, right? And so how do we make it a more holistic approach? And you look at the founding fathers like Adam Smith, who basically is the father of capitalism, in his book, Wealth of Nations, which is quoted as, kind of the Bible of capitalism, first thing he says is like, hey, listen, none of this makes any sense unless you read my first book called A Theory of Moral Sentiments. And if you don't have that anchored in, then it becomes just a race to the bottom, and so forget about the first book, race to the bottom. That's where we are. Right. And so that, that's a whole other subject, but that's a big piece of what drove me to make that film is like, it's not just dollars in the bank. It's time with my wife. It's time with my kids. Those are the things that are, that make me feel prosperous.
Oh, absolutely. And, that's like, if you have your health, you have a million wishes, as the saying goes. But if you don't have your health, you only have one wish. Have your health, right? Yeah. That's it. But it's all that focus. And you said this so beautifully. You said in Vitality, you address you'd say we're in a nation that is in a healthcare crisis, but it is a lifestyle crisis and a mindset crisis. Amen. And that's huge. That's so beautiful. So now the evolution of the microbiome, which has fascinated me because, as a gynecologist, certainly the vaginal microbiome, so underappreciated. I mean, seriously, so underappreciated, and is essential for life because there's not a single one that would be here without it. And so that's a really big part of it, but also the estrobolome, as women, we have estrogen producing bacteria that's part of our balance. Men and women, we have different gut bacteria and affects our hormone production. I mean, how awesome is that? Seriously. I mean, I knew men and women were different, but now even our gut bacteria are different. How cool is that?
Well, that's just it. It's, I've had so many how cool is that moments that I lost my hair. You know what I mean? I'm just like...
Pedram, that started decades ago.
That started a while ago, started a minute ago. But like, I mean, and then there's the kind of postbiotic universe, right? Where there's all this research right now where there's, specific bacteria in the vaginal canal that have biofilm they secrete that crowds out and kills any other bacterial invaders that are not supposed to be there. So instead of getting an infection, right, a UTI or vaginal infection, and then taking a pill that kills everything, including your gut bacteria and all these other things that you probably need there, what we're doing now is looking at these bacteria, isolating these bacteria, isolating what produces this. So it's not like a lactobacillus yogurt derivative. It's a human derivative of something that is supposed to be exactly where it's supposed to be with a targeted delivery. So even on the medical application, forget about diet and lifestyle and all things that are important from the top down, even on the medical application of this stuff, we're getting so targeted and we have such better precision medicine coming out of the microbiome. It's changed the game.
And it will continue to, because we're just at the, just scratching the surface when it comes to this mystery, uncovering this mystery. And I always say, the microbiome has to do with the biblical concept of soul ties, and we get into some interesting conversations there. But I want to go back to also understanding the big issue with Candida, and because that's a huge issue that we're facing in America, let alone women's health. So was there some revelation in there? And I can't wait to see this interconnected series.
A lot. So, I mean, it's not just bacteria, right? So it's bacteria, viruses, obviously, good versions. So there are other types of yeast and kind of, Candida that are there to be healthy, like Saccharomyces boulardii, like there's certain players that will crowd out, certain fungi that will crowd out the bad ones. Right? Certain bacteria that will crowd out the bad ones. And so we have parasites, we have nematodes, we have phages. There's all kinds of stuff in this life soup. And it's a community that interacts. And it's like, okay, you know what, that player over there is being bad, let's manage it. And it's not like saying, okay, I'm just going to take my acidophilus pill and, Hail Mary, my sins are all absolved. That's not how that works. Right? And so, when you look at someone who has Candida, you look at obviously, the sugar and the refined carbs and everything coming in. But then there's targeted botanicals that could beat down some of these colonies, right? And even even if you have to do a strong medical intervention, go on fluconazole for a month and just wipe it out, but then re-inoculate in a way where then that thrush, that kind of that Candida is out of the system, if you will, right? They will overwhelm everything. They will lead to inflammation. They will lead to immune issues. I mean, you know, I'm going to tell you about this, but once you have that handled and you create the kind of pecking order of the right players, and the pecking order is important because what we've realized, you look at this research and everyone's like doing backflips over it because it's like, okay, we've isolated a type of bacteria in rats that we know is only found in thin rats and not in obese ones. And when we take the thin rat bacteria, put it in the obese ones, they lose weight. Hallelujah, I'm going to make $1 trillion on supplements. Didn't work, right? Why? Because we're a bit more complicated. So there are levels, a pecking order. We have to eat vegetables and fiber and insoluble fiber for certain bacteria that take that, break it down, turn it into energy for us, our gut lining, and also turn it into other materials for the next round of bacteria to metabolize that then go into, you know, the bile acid that go here, that go there. I mean, it's a long, complicated chain of custody. But if we're not eating like our ancestors did and being smart about our fiber intake to feed our friends and let them have first pass, none of that other stuff happens. But when we do, and we introduce that, now we're seeing some promising results. So, yeah. I mean, it's amazing how it's all sequencing.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it too, going back to like, oh, well, that's why these traditions were created, or that's why these foods were eating. I mean, like, who would pull garlic out of the ground and smell it and like, oh man, this is going to be so good for food, right? Like, oh, look at my breath afterwards. I mean, totally for its effect on the microbiome.
Totally.
That's got to be how people...
We were in Italy for a month this year, families, you know, like wives and children and a couple families there. And I mean, I did not moderate, right? Like, I mean, we were drinking wine and eating food and I said, you know, gluten, forget it. And I mean, after a full month of debauchery, I think I gained 4 pounds, which is kind of less than I would gain just being home if I'm not careful.
For a weekend, right?
I would have gained 30 pounds at home, right? And I felt great and we all did. Right? Because we're having garlic and onions and everything. We were eating non-GMO foods. We were relaxing. I mean, it's just, you know, everyone's so worked up and stressed out about food here. And they should be because the food supply is messed up and you got to be careful what you eat. But also we're not putting in the botanicals. We're not cooking with garlic on everything. We're not using the right natural, you know, alkaloids and you know, polyphenols and all these things that come with these herbs and spices the way a lot of traditional cultures do. So that's a whole other, you know, it's a whole other conversation.
Oh, and I love it. But don't forget, you know, one of the biggest healing thing you did was that connection, right? Increasing oxytocin, being with friends and family. And that totally is the elixir of life. So,
Amen.
And that's again, why I like this interconnection, because our bacteria have to work together and not just in our own body, but we, you know, like it overflows to our family, right? Like the epigenetics concepts of it. We've got like a microbiogenetics combination.
Yeah.
Another field of science coming out.
It is.
It's fascinating because we got to be in sync together. And that's on a very, very cellular / microbiomal level. What's the word for that? Like, how do you say it? Just level of the microbiome?
Microbial level? Well, so it happens in this sphere, and there's different words, there's different arguments about what to call this thing because it's so new. But we know that there is about 10 to 100 times more gene expression from the microbiome than there is from us. Yeah. So, you know, most of our genes, a lot of our decisions are actually coming from our friends, and we're realizing that we're a community, right? It's not like this stewardship model of the garden. Like we are in the garden and we are just in the garden with our friends and it's all working in this symbiosis that's beautiful. It's just, there's so much happening around this understanding about who we truly are now that we're understanding how much of our genetics is actually not even our own, that, you know, it changes. You know, and this is interesting. This would be interesting for your audience is, a lot of the doctors, a lot of the like top experts that I interviewed in this space were women. And a lot of this science has been informed by ecological models and forestry models where, you know, like these these guys, the way like, allopathy came out is like, hey, you know what? It was battlefield medicine. Like, I got to patch this dude up, throw some penicillin at him. Hopefully he doesn't die so he can grab a gun and go shoot those other dudes, right? Like, that's where our medical model came from. And it's failed abysmally, right, with chronic disease. And so when we look at that and we're like, okay, what's going on here? It's not a whack-a-mole. It's not a pill for an ill. It's an ecological form of thinking that has much more to do with these interconnections than a lot of the kind of old science is willing to look at, because they're like, hey, what's the formula? You said then if X, then Y. That's, I just want to clock in and clock out. Like, don't ask me to think. I'm already a doctor, right? And so those kind of old crusty guard doctors who don't want to learn and think just aren't getting it. And so it's a paradigm shift. It's cracking the egg here. And you have to look through a different lens to understand what this is all saying.
Well, I think too, I think we're, as physicians going through medical school, spending a couple $100,000 at least on our medical education, is that we're given, this is our tool bag. This is our resources. This is our fail safe. This is what we've learned by the highest of the highest centers of academic medicine. Like, how can it be so wrong, right? How can, and there's so much, there's things that are right, crisis intervention. I mean, best of the best, but that chronic disease model, like what we have, should be held as crutches for the lifestyle interventions and understanding more of how we empower the body to heal itself. And that's just not taught. We're not taught that. We go there wanting to learn how to heal, and we're, given a prescription pad and a knife. And it just takes rebuilding and continuing to add to our toolbox. My toolbox right now went from a doctor's bag to essentially a warehouse, right?
Sure.
Like it expands. But I want to go back to the whack-a-mole because first I was like, what's a whack-a-mole? Is that the
whack-a-mole? Whack-a-mole, yeah.
Is that the
machine? It's a game where the moles pop up and you try to hit them. Like
whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole, yeah.
I thought that's so scary. I'm like, wait, okay.
And so we do that with symptoms, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, you got a headache? Here's something for your headache. Oh, here's something for your ulcers, right? And you just keep doing that until they're on 20 meds and 5 other meds to take care of those. And this ecological thinking is like, why do you have headaches? Why? Where's this ulcer coming from? What's going on? And as you start asking these more important questions, you get to real answers. And I'm telling you, okay, so I'm sitting in front of many, we interviewed so many people for the series. I'm sitting in front of one particular woman who 33 years, 5 autoimmune diagnoses, multiple drugs, a lifetime of suffering. Everyone's like, oh, you know what? You're hysterical, right? And it's just this whole, and this is the most offensive word ever, right? Because your uterus, it's because you have a uterus, you can't think straight, right? And so she's, getting talked down to by these doctors, and she's just like, they're putting on antidepressants, they're putting on all this stuff, and someone's like, oh, let's look at your gut, change the diet, change the microbiome. 6 weeks later, off all drugs, all 5 autoimmune diagnoses, basically fires her out.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome.
Come on. That's someone's entire life, right? She's in her 60s. It's half her life. It's her entire adult life.
Yep. Because it was antibiotic after antibiotic. And, one of the things too, in Perlmutter's book, talking about fecal transplant, and that, because like you said, this lactobacillus from dairy is not your lactobacillus, right?
Right.
And so do you hit on that and interconnected at all?
There's a whole episode that is on the new technology in fecal transplants.
Yes,
I went to the main place in Massachusetts where, all of the different GI docs are getting their poop, really. And just went through, looked at the screening process of how they do it and what they do. It's just fascinating, right? And if you're depressed, perhaps taking, the Dalai Lama's poop is going to make you happy. Right. And so some of the implications there, right now they're just using it for C. diff, but there's some really promising data on ulcerative colitis, depression. But here's the deal.
Autism, right? They're still in spectral disorders.
So here's the problem though. And this is what happened with me even. We go way back, me. I'm not a dumb guy. But as I'm sitting in these rooms listening to these people, there's still a part of me that's been trained by our dumb culture. Listening to this genius talking about the microbiome, in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, dude, so what probiotic do I take? Right, just banging on the table. What probiotic? And the answer isn't what probiotic do I take. It's how can I live more probiotically? right? Because if I
love
go
that.
to the Hadza tribe, which has got, so Marty Blazer, who's in the series, is like the, godfather of all this research, goes to these tribes like in the middle of nowhere that have no exposure to any of our, dumb toxins and crazy life. And he's like, wow, look at the diversity of bacteria. Look how healthy they are. They have zero chronic disease. They're so healthy. So let's take their poop, blend it up, and put it in our colons, and we'll be healthy, problem solved. No. Because if you could, that bacteria is going to die within a day because you're not eating what those people are eating, right? So it's one thing to say, I'm going to go, take a fecal transplant for my kid with autism, put it there and make everything okay. Here's your Twinkies and ding dongs back. Versus let's go do this intervention, which is miraculous, but then also have you eat like the healthy person whose, colonies you just implanted. That's where we're starting to see better results.
And the key point here, microbial diversity is associated with better health.
Yes.
And the diversity of our diet, herbs, plants, cyclical seasonal changes is associated with better health. That feeds a healthy, diverse microbiome. And I think that's huge. Like explore, have fun, travel, eat dirt, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Hike. You go hiking, you get all this dust, you're getting an inoculation of good bacteria. Like just be a human again, right? Like just get out. And so there's just so much. I mean, look, there's unbelievable, riveting stories that we captured. We went to the ivory towers. We went to the functional medicine doctors. Like we really captured this story in a way that, put it this way. I have a big crew. I got a bunch of, camera film guys that are just, that's what they do. And they're involved in this project and they all changed their diets. They've all dropped 20, 30 pounds. They're all like, they found Jesus here, right? Like they're like, I cannot believe how much difference this has made. It's just very compelling and it's transformed everyone who's touched it. And the thing hasn't even come out yet, but the people behind the scenes that have touched it, their lives are completely transformed.
Yeah, no doubt. I want to honor your time, Pedram, and I want to thank you for being here. And I'll put a link below for the Interconnected series, The Power to Heal from Within. And Pedram, also your website is well.org. You have a online magazine. You're just like all over the place.
I'm all over the place, but I'm sitting here now. And that's the thing. If you get healthy, yeah. Well, thank you. And see, the thing is, if you get healthy and you take care of yourself, then you get those 100 wishes. Right? So step in, take care of yourself, feed your own microbiome, get to a place where you're robust and healthy and happy. Then you have the energy to do things. I do lots of things, but I don't feel stressed or crazed because I just feel good. Like, what am I going to do? Sit around? Get up and help people.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time. And I'm also going to these are like my hashtags. How can I live more probiotically? Thank you, Pedram, for that quote. And just the message too is honor your body's design. And let's honor this intelligence. And that's what you've done in all of your shows, as well as I'm just thrilled because the microbiome has been fascinating me, certainly, especially in my field of expertise. I want to thank you so much for spending time today. Encourage our audience, Interconnected, the series, and please share with me. I'm going to be posting this. Share this with me and share your responses with me as well as Pedram. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on it. I can't wait till it's released any day now.
Any day now, coming up 27th of November. So
perfect.
You're in the making. Here we are. Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you all.